When I was just 8 years old, my world fell apart in a way no child should ever experience. My parents didn't simply step out for air or leave for a short trip, they vanished from my life completely. One morning they were in the kitchen drinking coffee, and by sunset they were gone without a trace, without a note, without a backward glance. They walked away from me as if I were nothing more than a suitcase they no longer wanted to carry. I stood on the front porch clutching my little backpack, convinced they would pull back into the driveway any minute. Hours passed. The sun dipped behind the trees. Still nothing. I kept telling myself they were coming back, because what parent just leaves their son behind? But the truth settled around me like fog. They weren't coming home. The only person who came for me was my grandmother, Elizabeth Walker, my Grandma Lizzie. She showed up in her faded blue station wagon, her face tight with anger and heartbreak when she realized what had happened. She dropped to her knees, cupped my face in her warm hands, and whispered, "You're with me now, Daniel. I won't let anything happen to you. You'll never be alone again." And she meant every word. For the next 10 years, she gave me everything my parents refused to give: love, structure, patience, and a sense of belonging. She became the mother and father I'd lost in a single day. Every morning, she woke me up with a soft knock and a plate of pancakes waiting on the kitchen table. Every school play, she sat in the very front row, clapping harder than anyone. Every test I aced went straight onto the refrigerator, like it was a medal. Her house wasn't fancy. The floors creaked, the wallpaper peeled in corners, and the furniture was older than both of us. But it smelled like cinnamon, coffee, and safety. The kind of home warmth that money can't buy. She filled my life with stories about perseverance, reminding me that hardship didn't define a person, choices did. When I lay awake at night wondering why my parents had left, she would sit beside my bed and say, "People sometimes run from responsibility, but you won't. You'll grow stronger because of this." And she was right. She taught me how to cook her family recipes, how to stretch a dollar, how to treat people with kindness even when they didn't return it. She made me mow the lawn every Saturday, insisting that it wasn't about the grass, it was about learning discipline. She laughed with me when I messed up, comforted me when life got confusing, and never once made me feel like I was a burden. She rarely mentioned my father, Thomas, or my mother, Linda. When she did, it was with a quiet mix of sadness and steel. "They chose their path," she'd say, "but you don't have to walk it." By the time I reached my teens, the pain of their abandonment had become a distant echo rather than an open wound. What shaped me was not the night they walked away, but the decade of love Grandma Lizzie poured into me. She turned my story from one of abandonment into one of resilience. But everything changed the day she died. At her funeral, a day that should have been about honoring her life, my parents appeared after more than 10 years of complete silence. They didn't show up with remorse or apology. They stood outside the church with stiff faces and cold eyes, like strangers who had wandered into the wrong place. They didn't come to say goodbye. They came for her money. Because what no one realized, not even me, was that Grandma Lizzie wasn't just a kind old woman with a big heart. She left behind an estate worth $80 million. And the people who abandoned me at 8 suddenly decided they were owed something. Their voices dripped with entitlement as they argued in the lawyer's office. My father leaned back with a smug smile, already imagining the wealth. My mother muttered that everything was finally going to be corrected, as if raising me for a decade had been some kind of crime. But when Mr. Collins, my grandmother's lawyer, opened the envelope containing her final letter, the whole room shifted. Everyone fell silent. He read her words, and with every sentence, the color drained from my parents' faces. Their confidence evaporated, their jaws locked. And in that moment, they understood that this story, her story, wasn't going to end the way they tried to rewrite it.
I wanted to stay strong, but the truth is I was broken inside. For 10 years, she had been everything to me. Without her, I felt like a boy again, standing on that porch, waiting for parents who would never return. As I turned to walk inside, I froze. Standing at the edge of the church steps were two faces I had not seen since I was a child. My father, Thomas Walker, wore a sleek black suit with a polished watch that caught the sunlight. His jaw was clenched, his hair grayer than I remembered, but his eyes carried the same sharpness that had once made me feel small. Beside him stood my mother, Linda, her lips painted red, her dress expensive, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought I was imagining them. I blinked, hoping they would vanish like ghosts, but they stayed. And as they began walking toward me, the pit in my stomach grew. "Daniel," my father said, his voice flat, as if we were strangers meeting by chance. I could not speak. My throat tightened. My mother placed a hand on my father's arm, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "You've grown," she said, her tone clipped, almost annoyed, as though it was inconvenient that time had passed without her. Anger surged through me, but grief weighed heavier. This was not their day. This was not about them. I turned without answering and walked inside the church. Throughout the service, I felt their presence behind me. While I wept during the eulogy, they sat stiff and cold, not a tear shed, not a hand raised in prayer. They looked like actors forced into a play they had no interest in performing. The congregation noticed. Whispers rippled down the pews. People remembered how they had left. Their return now was not seen as a gesture of mourning, but as an insult. After the burial, while friends gathered around me to offer comfort, Thomas and Linda stood off to the side, speaking in hushed tones. I avoided them. But the truth came crashing in when the lawyer approached me later that afternoon. Mr. Collins, a tall man with silver hair and a solemn expression, asked me to meet him in his office that evening for the reading of the will. He explained it was Lizzie's request that it be done quickly. I agreed, though my heart ached at the thought. When I arrived, my parents were already there, seated across from one another with stiff postures. Thomas glanced at his watch impatiently. Linda tapped her manicured nails against the wooden arm of her chair. I sat down opposite them, forcing myself to hold my head high. Mr. Collins entered carrying a leather folder. He greeted me warmly, then turned his gaze to my parents. His expression was polite but distant. He took his seat at the head of the table. "We are here today to honor the final wishes of Elizabeth Walker," he said. My father leaned back, crossing his arms. "Let's get on with it," he said, his tone dismissive. Linda added, "Yes, we all know she had considerable assets. It is only right they return to the family." Her words stung, and I could no longer stay silent. Return to the family? She was my family. Where were you when I was a boy crying myself to sleep? Where were you when I needed someone to stand at my school concerts? You abandoned us both. Thomas narrowed his eyes. "Watch your tone. You're still our son." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I stopped being your son the day you walked away." The tension in the room was thick to choke on. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears as Mr. Collins adjusted his glasses and prepared to read. My parents leaned forward, anticipation written across their faces, convinced that wealth was about to fall into their hands. For me, the moment was not about money. It was about justice. It was about hearing the last words of the woman who had given me everything. Mr. Collins opened the folder slowly, and the sound of paper sliding across the table filled the silence. My parents exchanged a quick glance, a small smirk tugging at Thomas's mouth. He thought he had already won. I clenched my fists beneath the table, not out of fear, but out of the need to anchor myself. Whatever came next, I knew Lizzie had prepared it with the same deliberate care she had used to raise me. As the lawyer cleared his throat and began to speak, I braced myself. I was ready to hear her last words. My parents were ready too, but for very different reasons. As I sat across from my parents in the lawyer's office, I felt the full weight of 10 years pressing down on me. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the shuffling of papers as Mr. Collins prepared to speak. My parents sat with smug expressions, their confidence radiating like a storm that had already decided its course. I could have let their presence break me. I could have sunk back into the role of the abandoned child, powerless and forgotten. But something inside me shifted. I remembered the nights when Grandma Lizzie sat at my bedside, reminding me that strength comes from within. She had told me countless times that I should never allow others to decide my worth. Her voice echoed in my mind now, steady and unwavering. You are stronger than you know, Daniel. Never let anyone take that away from you. I straightened in my chair, my shoulders squared. I took a slow breath and looked my parents directly in the eyes. They did not see a boy anymore. They saw a young man who had endured their absence and survived. I would not let them twist this day into one of victory for themselves. This was about honoring Lizzie's life and her sacrifices. My father leaned forward slightly, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. You don't need to act tough, Daniel. Once this is over, we'll take care of everything. It's time you stopped pretending you know how the world works. I kept my voice calm, though my pulse thundered in my ears. The world you left me in taught me plenty. I don't need you to take care of anything. My mother rolled her eyes and adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. You'll thank us later when you realize how much responsibility comes with wealth. You're too young to understand what to do with it. That money belongs with us. We built this family long before Lizzie interfered.
Her words struck me, but not in the way she intended. I thought about the nights Lizzie had worked late just to keep the lights on. I thought about the meals she had prepared, the school supplies she had scraped together, the endless love she poured into me when no one else would. My parents had built nothing. They had abandoned everything. I leaned forward. You didn't build anything. She did. She gave me a life when you threw me away. If you think I'm going to stand by and let you claim her legacy, you don't know me at all. Their faces hardened. My father's jaw tightened, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. My mother shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening around her bracelet. The silence that followed was heavy, and I knew they felt the resolve in my voice. Mr. Collins cleared his throat. If we may, it is time to proceed. The air in the office grew tense. The lawyer's hand hovered over the sealed envelope containing Lizzie's final will. My parents leaned forward with anticipation. My father rubbed his hands together, confident he was moments away from claiming everything. My mother whispered, "Finally," as though this day had been owed to her. I stayed quiet, but my heart pounded. I was not afraid of what the will would say. I trusted Lizzie completely. Still, I braced myself, knowing this moment would define everything. As Mr. Collins carefully opened the envelope, I closed my eyes for a second and pictured Lizzie's face. I remembered her laughter, her warmth, and her determination. I remembered her telling me that real power came from integrity, not greed. That thought gave me strength. I opened my eyes again, ready for whatever words would follow. My father broke the silence with a low chuckle. "This is going to be simpler than you think, Daniel. You'll see. She was still my mother. No matter what story she fed you, blood matters." I met his gaze without blinking. Blood matters when you honor it. You didn't. The color rose in his cheeks, but he said nothing. For the first time, I felt like the balance of power in the room had shifted. Mr. Collins placed the open document on the table. He glanced at me first,
offering the smallest nod, then began reading the opening lines. My parents straightened in their seats, ready to receive the fortune they believed belonged to them. In that moment, I made a silent decision. No matter what the will contained, I would live in a way that honored Lizzie's values. I would not let greed poison me the way it had consumed my parents. If the estate came to me, I would protect it, not for my own comfort, but as a continuation of her legacy. If somehow it went to them, I would still walk out with my dignity intact. The choice had already been made in my heart. I would not fight with anger or desperation. I would stand with the quiet strength she had taught me. This moment was no longer about money. It was about respect, about truth, about the bond between a grandmother and the boy she raised into a man. The lawyer's voice carried through the room as he reached the most crucial part of the document. My parents' expressions were eager, filled with greed. Mine was steady, anchored by the memory of Liz's unwavering love. Whatever was about to happen, I was ready to face it. Mr. Collins's voice filled the room as he began to read my grandmother's final will. The sound of his measured tone carried a weight that made every second feel longer than it was. My father leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, a confident smile tugging at his lips. My mother folded her arms tightly across her chest, her chin lifted as though she were preparing to receive a crown. I sat still, my hands clasped in my lap, my heart pounding, but my resolve unshaken. To my beloved grandson, Daniel Walker. Mr. Collins began. You have been the greatest joy of my life. From the moment you came into my care, you became the son I never thought I would have again. Every sacrifice I made for you, and I have never regretted a single moment. My only wish in this world was to see you grow into the man you are today. For that reason, I leave my entire estate, valued at $80 million, solely and unconditionally to you. The room seemed to freeze. My breath caught in my throat. I felt my father's eyes burning into me, his earlier confidence dissolving into disbelief. My mother's mouth dropped open, her perfectly painted lips parting as though she had forgotten how to breathe. Mr. Collins continued without hesitation. To my son Thomas and his wife Linda, who chose to abandon Daniel when he needed you most, I leave $1 each. This is not an oversight, nor is it cruelty. It is a reminder that true wealth is not found in money, but in the love and responsibility you chose to throw away. My hope is that one day you understand that your actions cost you far more than any inheritance ever could. A stunned silence filled the office. My father's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. His jaw tightened, and he slammed his fist against the table so hard that the documents rattled. "This is a joke," he barked. "She had no right to do this. I am her son. This money should be mine." Mr. Collins looked at him calmly. "Mr. Walker, this will is legally binding. Your mother was of sound mind, and these were her explicit wishes. There is no mistake." My mother's composure cracked. She shot up from her chair, her voice shrill. "After everything we gave her, this is how she repays us? After all those years, she chooses him over her own blood?" I stood slowly, my legs trembling, but I kept my voice steady. "She chose me because I was here. She chose me because I loved her and stayed by her side when you walked away. You abandoned both of us, and you don't get to rewrite history just because there's money involved now." My father glared at me, his teeth clenched. "You think you deserve this? You're just a kid. You wouldn't know what to do with that kind of money. We should be the ones to manage it, not you." I met his gaze directly, refusing to look away. "I don't need you to manage anything."
Lizzie trusted me, and that is all that matters. She knew me better than anyone. She knew what I would do with her legacy, and she wanted no part of it in your hands. The room grew tense again, the air thick with their rage and my defiance. Mr. Collins shuffled the papers back into the folder and said firmly, "This concludes the reading of the will. Any attempt to contest it will be futile. The documents have been carefully prepared to withstand challenge. Elizabeth was very clear in her intentions." My father stood his chair, scraping against the floor. He pointed a finger at me, his face twisted with anger. "This isn't over, Daniel. You'll regret this. We'll make sure of it." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I refused to back down. "No," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "It is over. You had your chance to be my parents, and you threw it away. Lizzie gave me everything you never could. You don't get to take that from me now." My mother's face went pale, and she sank back into her chair. For the first time, her confidence cracked into something closer to shame, though whether it was for her actions or simply for losing the inheritance, I could not tell. She looked at me with eyes that held no warmth, only bitterness. As they gathered their things, the reality of what had happened settled in. Their power over me had vanished. For years, I had carried the weight of their abandonment, wondering if I had done something wrong, if I had somehow driven them away. Now, watching them storm out of the office, I realized the truth. Their absence had never been about me. It had always been about them. Their selfishness, their greed, their refusal to put anyone else above themselves. Mr. Collins placed a hand on my shoulder before I left. "Your grandmother believed in you, Daniel. She wanted to make sure you had not only security, but the freedom to build a life on your own terms. She was proud of you. You should remember that above all else." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing she had seen me, valued me, and protected me even in her final act. Walking out of that office, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. I had lost the most important person in my life, but I had gained the clarity she wanted me to have. My parents had shown their true faces, and Lizzie had left me with more than wealth. She had left me with the undeniable proof that love was stronger than betrayal and that integrity was worth more than money. When I left the lawyer's office that evening, the world outside felt different. The air was cool, the sun was setting, and the streets glowed with the amber light of dusk. My parents had stormed off in anger, their voices echoing faintly down the hallway as they argued with each other. For the first time in my life, their presence no longer held power over me. They could shout, threaten, or scheme, but the truth had already been spoken. Grandma Lizzie had seen through their selfishness and protected me, even in death. I walked to my car, slowly, letting the events settle in my mind. Grief still sat heavy in my chest. I wanted nothing more than to hear Liz's voice again, to feel her warm hand on mine, to sit in our kitchen while she told me everything was going to be all right. She was gone, and no amount of money or legal documents could change that. What she left me, however, was more than financial security. She left me with proof that love matters more than blood, and that the choices we make define who we are far more than the titles we carry. That night, I returned to her house. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I walked through each room, tracing my fingers over the familiar furniture, the photographs on the walls, and the worn wooden banister she used to grip as she climbed the stairs. Every corner of the house carried her spirit. The smell of cinnamon still lingered faintly in the kitchen. Her knitting needles rested in a basket by the couch, as if she had only stepped away for a moment. I sat at the table where we had shared countless meals and thought about what to do next. $80 million was a staggering amount. Most people would see it as an opportunity to live in luxury, to buy houses, cars, and vacations. But I knew that that was not what Lizzie wanted. She had never been a woman who cared about wealth for its own sake. She valued community, kindness, and the chance to make life better for others. If she had trusted me with this fortune, then I had a responsibility to carry those values forward. The next morning, I contacted Mr. Collins again. I told him I wanted to set aside a portion of the estate to create a scholarship fund in Lizzie's name. I wanted children who grew up without parents, children who felt abandoned or forgotten, to have a chance to pursue education and build futures they deserved. I told him I also wanted to donate to local charities, especially the shelters and food banks Lizzie had supported quietly for years. She had always said that if you have enough to share, you should never keep it all for yourself. As I made these decisions, I felt lighter. I realized I wasn't just managing money. I was shaping a legacy that would outlast me. Every dollar used to lift someone else would be another piece of Lizzie living on in the world. That thought gave me peace. My parents tried contacting me in the weeks that followed. Letters arrived, some begging, some threatening. They called me ungrateful, said I was turning my back on them, but I had learned enough to recognize their words for what they were: attempts to manipulate me back into a role I no longer played. I did not answer their calls. I did not respond to their letters. The boy who once waited on the porch for them was gone. In his place stood a man who knew the difference between family and strangers. The community, however, rallied around me. Neighbors came to the house with casseroles and flowers, not because I was wealthy now, but because they loved Lizzie and wanted to honor her. They told me stories I had never heard: how she had paid for a neighbor's medicine when they were short on money, how she had tutored kids in math after school, how she had volunteered quietly at the church food drive every holiday.
With every story, I realized just how deep her impact had been. She had left her mark not with money, but with love and action. One evening, I sat on the porch, where my childhood had begun in heartbreak and ended in resilience. I looked up at the stars and thought about Lizzie. I whispered a thank you into the night, hoping somehow she could hear me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for teaching me what love really means. Thank you for protecting me, even now. In the end, the lesson was clear. Wealth can disappear, but character endures. My parents believed money would give them power, but what they failed to understand was that real power comes from love, responsibility, and integrity. Lizzie's final act had not been about punishing them. It had been about protecting me and ensuring I would carry her values forward. I still grieve her absence. I still miss her every day. But I walk with my head high because I know I am not walking alone. Her love walks with me. Her lessons guide me, and her legacy now stretches far beyond our family, reaching every life touched by the choices I make in her name. That is the story of how I lost the woman who raised me, and how even in her death, she gave me the greatest gift of all: the strength to stand on my own, the wisdom to value love over greed, and the courage to build a future that honors her name. That is my story. It is not just about losing my grandmother or facing parents who only returned when money was involved. It is about discovering where true family lies, about realizing that love is stronger than greed, and about carrying forward the legacy of the one person who never gave up on me. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the meaning of family and the value of love over money, then I invite you to be part of this community. Like this video so it can reach more people who need to hear it. Share it with someone who might be going through their own struggles. Leave a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your experiences, or the lessons you carry from your own life. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we have many more powerful true life stories that will challenge you, inspire you, and remind you that no matter how dark life feels, there is always a light to be found. Thank you for listening.